I remember sitting in my house, turning on my computer, and I sit down and I start writing this story about Sprinkles and how he wanted to be a fire dog. And the thing about this little dog was, as I start writing it, there's all these challenges he has to overcome that come down to physical limitations, self-doubt, and a critical corner mutts that are there to tell him he's not good enough, strong enough, fast enough, brave enough to be able to do what he wants. Now, when I tell that part of the story to people, they often tell me that doesn't sound like a children's book. It sounds like an everybody's life book. I said, that's right. So when people say to me, what age is the book for? I don't know how to tell them. This book is for 40-year-olds too. It's not just for 4-year-olds. But I'll share this with you that that book was written more than 20 years ago. And it's not that I ever forgot about it. I just never really thought much about it. And throughout the years, I had some books published. Every now and then I'd think about Sprinkles, but it wasn't until I was at work one day and my parents were opening up a time capsule. Now, I don't know if anybody else does this that's listening to this, but my family, not just my parents and brothers and sisters, or brother and sisters, but my cousins, aunts, uncles, we would put a time capsule together, and every 20 years or so, open this PVC pipe with a cap on it, open it up, and pull everything out that was in there. There'd be videotapes in there. And with technology, you have to find something to play this stuff on. And there'd be pictures, there'd be all this stuff in there. And so I'm at work one day, and my wife and my two boys, my two youngest, go with my family. They open up the time capsule. When I show up at home the next day, my wife says, you have to read this to your boys. I said, read what? She goes, this was in the time capsule. And it was Sprinkles the fire dog.
Right.
And I look at it, the original one that I wrote, and I'm thinking, I haven't seen this on paper in forever. And I sit my boys down on the couch. I start reading them the story, and I become emotional because I suddenly realize, holy cow, when I wrote this, I was more like that young, insecure puppy than I thought. And what I've been able to achieve in my life, I feel like, man, this has all come full circle. So I go to Nicholas's school about a week later, and they have the mystery reader. And I bring a book in, just a regular children's book, but I also bring Sprinkles in. I read the book to the kids, and then I take these sheets of paper, which Sprinkles is just written, it's not a book, and then I read Sprinkles to them. And they loved the story of Sprinkles. And all they wanted to talk about was that story instead of the other one. And I showed them this, and I said, this is how a book starts. Right. It starts like this before it becomes one like this. And it was a year later that my son came home and said, Daddy, I wrote a book. But I'm sharing all that with you because that was even probably 4 years before you and I started speaking about Sprinkles. Right. And I remember approaching you about this book and this idea, thinking the greatest thing on the planet Earth for me, and I'm not even kidding you, with regards to this book, would be if Paul Combs illustrated it. And I thought it's probably a long shot. We're friends. We're good friends. We've worked on projects before. So we you know, I'm going to propose the idea. But when I proposed it to you, I didn't know what your response was going to be. But what was your initial thought when you read it?
Hell no.
I love it.
Well, and it's because I've never seen myself as a children's book illustrator. You know, that I always thought my work was too bold, or, you know, there was an edginess to the work because I'd been an editorial cartoonist so long, even, you know, as a syndicated political cartoonist, that I never thought my work would ever translate over. And I'd been approached by other authors, you know, with their stories, and I've turned them down for decades, and I just didn't want to be a children's book illustrator because I didn't think that I could ever fit in that realm. And I know that you and I talked about it the first time, and I was like, oh, okay, let me see, you know. And I mean, I kind of give you a passive aggressive response if I recall. But there was something about once I read the story, and to me, what really started kind of luring me in a little bit were the corner mutts. Because I have always been that guy that hates a bully. Yeah. You know, my fights in high school were always standing up for somebody And sometimes I won and sometimes I lost. But it was always standing up for somebody that was being bullied or someone was being pushed around. And so what really started getting me was Sprinkles being bullied by the corner mutts. And it just kept coming back and kept coming back. And I kept thinking about it, and then you and I talked a few more times and I started getting a little bit more excited about it. And I don't know how much you want to get into the process of this, but as you know, I mean, it took a long time for me to kind of get from point A to point D and weave my way through there to actually get to where we are with this finished book.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, everything from artistically to the mood of it to I'd never illustrated a book like this. I'm used to telling a story in one panel. I've never told a story over 25 spreads, that we had to do for the book. So, I mean, this was a big uphill learning curve for me. Just everything from creative process to battling my own corner mutts in my head.
I want to talk about the creative process. I want to talk about how this, maybe we could start by the first, I guess, concepts of what we thought Sprinkles should look like, because I wrote the story, but when you said, what do we want him to look like? There's certain characteristics he had that's explained in the book. But for me, it was like, well, you do your thing and we'll talk about it. So maybe we could show some of them.
Yeah. So I'm going to share my screen.
And for those of you that are looking at me and can see this, if you're watching this on video, the illustration behind me is part of an illustration from this book. So we can maybe talk about that a little later, but there it is.
Yep. So this was, these, and in reality, these are only about an inch tall. And these were just small first little concept doodles that I was doing of what I thought maybe Sprinkles would look like. And again, I think you can really kind of see a little bit more of an editorial cartoon style coming out in this. And he just doesn't come to me, I guess he just doesn't have the personality that I thought he needed to have.
Right.
So did I ever share this with you? This version?
These two I never saw. I saw another one.
Because I think you and I talked about it. And so this is the one that I sent to you. This is the first one that I actually fleshed out of what Sprinkles might look like.
And I remember thinking, well, this dog looks like he's too confident. And I remember thinking that, like, this dog looks like he's already somebody who can kind of handle bullies. And I'm thinking this looks like Sprinkles 5 years later. That's what I kind of thought.
And I think that was what you even texted me that day.
I may have.
Yeah. So, I mean, so the evolution process kind of went from that more of a Cartoon Network even style of dog to a more realistic dog. And what we ended up with was this was the very first style sheet that we created for Sprinkles. And this is the style that we would use throughout the book. And if you can even see up in the upper right-hand corner there, it's dated 12/1/19. So that gives the viewers a little bit of an idea of the long drawn out process this was. As me as an artist, being able to kind of convey what I wanted this image to be, because I knew that the story was phenomenal and I knew it kept drawing me in. What I didn't want to do was provide, I guess, illustrations that didn't match the impact of the story.
Right.
And I knew we had an opportunity to do something very, very special, especially within the fire service, but maybe, in the general public as well, of creating a book that not only had a phenomenal message, but also had artwork that kind of, it laid the foundation for that message.
Right.
So, I mean, the words are laid onto the art. So the art is the foundation for the power of the word. And that's kind of how I had to look at it. But yeah, this is our first style sheet.
And when you sent this to me, my immediate response was, that's him. That's Sprinkles. I mean, you've captured that character better than I could possibly imagine. I remember showing it to my wife, showed it to my sisters, showed it to my brother, showed it to my parents, saying, hey, remember that story, Sprinkles? They all remembered it.
Right.
And I said, this is him. And I remember them saying, who drew this? And I told them it was Paul Combs, and he's going to illustrate the book. And they said, when's it going to come out? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know, because I don't think
Right.
Paul's ready to illustrate it yet.
Right.
But that was the process for me. For me, it was like, you know, I have a very good friend who had asked his wife out on a date. I think he says 15 times before she actually said yes. I felt like that with you with this book. I'm like, I know, okay, I know he's going to draw it. I know he's going to illustrate it. I just don't know when. It's got to be on his time. But I get
Yeah.
that, because I have to do things on my time frame too. So I understand that.
Well, you know, and I mean, if I were to start a children's book today, it would be a much quicker process because I've already kind of set, again, a foundation for myself on how I want,
Yeah.
you know, to actually approach this. But if I would have started the day after I created this style sheet, we would not have the book we have today. It would look
Yeah.
completely different.
I would
So, I
agree.
mean, just creatively and in life and everything else, I had to kind of get there and understand visually how I wanted, you know, even the viewer to portray this or see this book. Because I know a lot of people haven't seen the book in its entirety, but one of the things you and I talked about is we didn't want it one perspective.
Right.
Is that we wanted a lot of these scenes to be from Sprinkle's point of view. You were down on the ground with him, and some of the scenes are above, you know. So you know, throughout the book, you're looking at different perspectives of this city. Yeah, even speaking of the city,
Yeah, if you could show
one of the
how
things that
you
I
draw
wanted to
that,
do. Yeah.
because I got this picture behind me of a
Mhm.
city. Can you talk about the I guess the process of drawing
Yeah.
the city?
So, like I said, you know, I mean, we knew that we were going to put Sprinkles in the setting of a city. And, you know, and the visuals that I had in my head is that he wouldn't be in the upper suburbs. You know, he was going to be in the gritty part of the city. He was going to be in the not so nice part of the city. This is where this is where the mutts, you know, this is where they thrive.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wanted the city to be one of the characters in the book. So as the book progresses through, you'll see different parts of the city. But you know, and I was inspired by it a lot because, you know, I'm a Midwest guy. So, I mean, a lot of the reference shots that I used for this city all came from Toledo and Detroit, a little bit of Philadelphia in there,
Yeah.
you know. So, you know, I definitely wanted the city to be part of one of the characters of the book and to have kind of a life of its own as well. And I guess the best way to do that is to start with the opening scene of the book. So if you look here, you got the, you know, the white image there is actually the layout of the book. And because we went with a 9x9 book, and we talked about this earlier, not to have these as one-page illustrations, but a complete spread. So you get this full scene in front of you. So just to kind of talk about a little bit about the process of drawing these. So you start with the white as far as the format, and then I draw these perspective lines. And I kind of think about what perspective I want to be at as a viewer. Do I want to be down on the ground, or I want to be looking up at more of a bird's eye view? And so what we'd do is that I would actually go in and roughly block in what this city would look like.
Yeah.
Okay. And then from there, I would make sure I get these turned on correctly. Nope. As I would go in and I would actually ink in the city. Let me turn these perspective lines off now. So there you get kind of what is just the nitty gritty. This is the drawing that actually started this scene. And at that point, then I'd go in and I would actually paint the city. Now, this was all drawn and painted digitally.
That's what I
And
wanted to ask you real quick. So like
Yeah.
you draw, this isn't like I guess a computer program where you're like, hey, let's make this brick. You draw every brick by hand.
Oh yeah, everything is drawn by hand. I guess I can kind of zoom in on some of this, but you can see even kind of the detail.
Yeah.
Yeah, all this is hand drawn. And you know, and the process of drawing and painting is no different than if I were doing it on I don't know if you can still see it sharing my screen, but my drawing board behind me.
I can.
It's just that I'm drawing on a digital canvas instead of a piece of paper.
Right.
So yeah, so this is actually the drawn and painted city, and then I would.
And talk about bringing your own character into it. You have a guitar hanging on your wall behind you right now. You have a guitar right there in the, you know, a guitar store. Yeah, secondhand guitars. There you go.
Yeah, secondhand guitars. And so, you know, yeah, I mean, it's funny that you and I both kind of, we kind of inserted some different personalities within the book and some different things that are important to us. But so this was the actual city piece that was actually put in. And then I would go in and paint in street lights and people and cars. And the beautiful thing about doing this, especially digitally, is that within Photoshop, I can paint these and I can put everything on separate layers. So by the time that I put sprinkles in, and I'll actually put in, do you want to go ahead and share the first
Sure, yeah.
whole thing? So, you know, Sprinkles is a little puppy who lived in a big city. Sprinkles didn't have any family, and the big city was a lonely place for a little dog. And just by those words, those powerful words in that descriptor, I knew that I wanted this huge city scene and this little bitty dog in the scene, because I want you to feel just how big and intimidating the city can be for a little puppy. And that's how the city itself really becomes part of the story and one of the characters, is that you're either getting large city views or you're getting close-up views. But I really wanted the viewer to feel like they were in this city with Sprinkles.
Well, you did it. Now, how long does it take to do an illustration like that one there?
You know, once I finally got my legs and finally got an idea of the color palettes and everything that I wanted to use, I mean, this one illustration here took an entire week to complete. But by the time that I was getting toward the end of the book, and I illustrated these sequentially, was that I could finish one within a day and a half. You know, and you're probably talking 12 to 13, 14 hours in each spread. But when I started, I mean, and I actually went back and I would actually, because I would figure something out in spread 5, and I would have to go back and revise the previous 4 because of something that I'd figured out that I wanted to do.
You know, so, now, Paul, in my books and in my seminars, I talk about how I talk about something called the lane theory. And the concept behind the lane theory is when you're building a team, everybody has talent, everybody has skill, everybody has ability. What you have to do is find out what people are good at, put them in that lane, and get out of their way. So as a guy who had written this book, once this book was in your hands, it's completely out of my hands right now. There's just very few things we changed to the actual story itself, a few words here and there, maybe we merged, but it was all up to you. For me, it came down to what I need to do is just let Paul do his thing. And every time you completed a panel, sometimes you'd say, hey, I have another panel, I'll send it to you. Sometimes I'd think you weren't even working on the book and you say, hey, I just finished 4. And I'm like, well, really? So I'm like so excited about this because I'm going to see 4 panels today. So, but here's the thing that I want to share with you. The hardest part for people that are creative like you and me, but the hardest part is to kind of let go of the reins and just say, do your thing and don't try to micromanage and don't try to overlook. But for me, partnering up with you has made that such an easy thing. It's made me understand the value of truly having the right person in the right position. Because I never had to say, Paul, do this, or let's do that, or let's do. You asked me for my opinion, but at the same time, I just trusted what you were going to come up with was going to be better than anything I could even offer. And I just want to share that with the listeners because I want them to know when you put the right person in the right position, the worst thing you can do is now try to control them. Just let them do their thing.
And, you know, and I guess right back at you with that too, because, you know, a lot of authors would have been very frustrated with the process that I took getting to this point. They wouldn't have been patient enough to say, okay, find the legs. Let's get the right character. Let's get the right story flow. Let's get the right mood. And you were so accommodating as far as letting me kind of get there, you know, as an artist. That, I mean, again, we wouldn't be where we are with this book. And you know, I'm proud of what we've accomplished here because I do think it is something incredibly special. And I don't know that would have been accomplished with any other author.